My name is Tim Horwood. I'm in the broadcast, media, entertainment, and music space. Some people would call me a creative director, creative producer, a director. I don't know actually exactly what I am. It's hard to define. But I've been playing in this space for a long time, and basically in the content creation space, whether that be visual content or music content or the combination of two, really. That's where I live. So I was born in Cape Town in June 1976, the time of the youth uprisings in South Africa. So I came out when there was a spirit of youth in the air, you know, I like to think. And grew up in Cape Town till I was 12 years old, and then moved to Joburg with my family at the age of 12, 13. I was a kid, I was into skateboarding, I was into rap music from a very young age. And I was also into like singing and acting, and I used to do a lot of stage plays and stuff when I was younger. I grew up in the church. My father was a preacher. So I grew up in the church, and I was in the church band and like sang at church and all of that, and got into the idea of, or just had a natural penchant for singing and acting and whatever. So I used to act in the school plays, and I was always very into that. And then just sort of naturally gravitated towards television as I moved to Joburg. My mother was a ballroom dancer, and always wanted her kids to be in the entertainment space. So she used to encourage us to go to auditions and get involved in those kind of things. So when I first got to oh no, hold on. I'd been in a TV ad in Cape Town. So when I was about 10 years old, I went to an audition. I featured in a television commercial. And at the time, I think I'd said I want to be a teacher and, you know, like want to be various things, even a preacher at some point, because, you know, looking at my father. And when I walked on set, I remember this day. I was 10 years old, right? 1986. I walked on set and I saw a set and cameras and lights, and something inside me triggered, like, this is what I want to do. This is my space, you know, at that age already. So I was lucky enough to be exposed to the industry at a very young age. Then when we moved to Joburg, I was 12, 13 years old, and I went and auditioned for a television show and got the part acting in a TV show with Isaac Chokwe, actually. The show was called, it was part of Tele School at the time on SABC, which was, the channel was called CCV, which was before SABC was SABC1. And we acted in some like educational television show. It was around mathematics. And I had to play the kid who was dumb and who couldn't do any maths. I didn't even know how to switch a calculator on. So I played the stereotypically dumb character, which was cool because I was dumb at maths. I don't make very many decisions consciously. I feel that guidance shows me the direction I must take. So I'm kind of like, I kind of surrender a little bit to where the universe wants me to go. I know it sounds like very hippie-ish and whatever, but it's kind of just how things have been for me. So when I felt that thing, I guess what I learned at a very early age is trust that feeling. You know, if something feels right and it feels like the direction you should go in, go with it. And don't question it too much and try and bring too much logic into it. Just go with it. So for example, I was on camera. So I was an actor, you know, at a young age, and a TV presenter. But I was more interested in making it. So I learned also that put the ego aside. If you're the guy in front of the camera, so what? Put the ego aside and go and bash cables, carry the tripod. And that's what I used to do, even when I was a presenter and I was famous in those days. But it was like I was willing to, you know, I had humility to be like, I want to learn this thing. So I, you know, didn't, you know, and I think that was a value that was also brought from my family. Another one brought from my family was professionalism and punctuality and courteousness and politeness. Like, and that's very important on a set and whatever. Be cool with everyone. Don't have chips on the shoulders. Don't feel better than someone else, because ultimately collaboration is the way the best magic comes out of anything. So I think I learned that as well, to collaborate with the team, to work closely, to hear everyone's perspective and incorporate that into my thinking as well. So I was quite lucky in that because I had been on set for many years by the time I finished high school. I already knew what I wanted to do. A lot of guys reach the end of matric and they sort of don't know what to do, so they take a vac year or they just go study something random, I was pretty sure I didn't want to study anymore. I didn't enjoy studying so much at school, I enjoyed learning things and getting information, but I didn't like the structure of school at all. I went to boys' schools my whole life, like boys' rugby playing schools. Rondebosch boys in Cape Town and King Edward VII in Joburg. I'm a Kes boy. So I kind of felt frustrated and restricted in those environments. Even though I enjoyed playing rugby. My father was a professional rugby player and a sportsman. So I was into rugby and everything, but I felt restricted in that system. And I think this is partly a result of that, I learned how not to be, put it that way, at these schools as well, So I was frustrated in that system and I didn't want to study anymore. I felt like I'd been studying my whole life. I had been from 6 to 18. I don't want to study and go to school anymore. I want to now work because I knew what I wanted to do. And at the time in South Africa, there wasn't really any schools that could teach you much. This is 95, my first year out of high school. The AFTA didn't exist. I think maybe AFTA Garth Holmes had just started conceptualizing this thing, but I don't think it had even opened yet. He started in Pretoria. So there was no film school really. So I had, when I left matric, 3 different production companies that I'd worked with as a presenter offer me work to say, do you want to come work for us and learn the industry? So it was a no-brainer. I was like, I had options to choose from. So in fact, Urban Brew had offered to send me to LA to film school, which is an incredible lifetime opportunity. But I was so not wanting to study that I was like, I don't even want to do that. Plus, I don't like being boxed. I was very worried that if someone's going to pay for me to go to film school in LA, it means I'm going to have to work for them for some years afterwards. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to be completely free and decide where I want to go at any point, So I chose not to take that option, and I took another production company in Pretoria's option, and I worked for them for a couple of years. In that time, I immediately went straight into directing content. So we're making youth magazine shows and environmental shows and things like that. So I was scripting, I was directing, I was conceptualizing stuff, magazine style stuff, already straight out of school. And that's why I was like, I don't want to go study now. I want to actually make content that gets broadcast and seen by people. So I did that for a couple of years, and then my anti-everything sort of took over completely, and I stopped working, and I went and I took my shoes off and I didn't put them on for 2 years. I became a proper hippie, and I was just like, I need to just discover myself. Started growing my locks, all of that. And then I went overseas for a while and just kind of try to find, myself. Even though I knew who I was, I wanted to, I just needed to let go of everything. Then when I came back from traveling, I got a call from, and then I was actually unemployed. For one of the few times in my life I was unemployed. And I got a call from Donnie at Urban Brew. And he was like, there's this show that we're doing. It's called Castle Loud. And we want to they had just started it. And then they were like, but we're having issues with our current director, producer, whatever, EP. We want you to come, and would you move? I was in Cape Town at the time. I had gone back to Cape Town. So he's like, do you want to come through and work on this thing? So I said, cool. Again, guidance came through and was like, this is where you must go. So I thought, cool, back to Joburg, and started working at Urban Brew on Castle Loud and really created that property and really built it. That was an incredible time because that was just post democracy. This is now 97-ish. And we're producing content for the first time that was really reflective of South African youth culture. It hadn't really been done. All the television before that point was really made for a minority. It wasn't really made to cater to the audience, the real population, So it was a very exciting time, and we were making one of the first shows that was dealing with youth culture, real youth street culture of South Africa. Kwaito music, all the Kwaito artists. It was like when Kwaito was booming, So we put these guys on. We helped build that Kwaito culture and get it onto a television platform. We formulated, Umzegezeke had just come out during that time and was doing prank calls on YFM. So YFM had just launched as well. And Zegezeke was doing prank calls, so we called him. We were like, yo, let's put you on TV. He's like, I don't want people to know who I am. So we literally the one day put a T-shirt on his head. My boy Kevin, shout out Kevin, put a T-shirt on his head and cut eyes in it. It was like, now no one can see your face. And then that was how Zegezeke was born. So we were part of this incredible wave of energy that was happening in South Africa and in youth culture and in broadcast. It was the first time that shows like this had been made. So we were making the show Casa Loud. And I feel that energy, in hindsight now, that energy that was happening in South Africa rippled upwards all through the continent. And it was almost like the start of a genesis of this like proud African youth culture that we were sort of part of and helping to grow. Look, the industry's always been quite close. I mean, I was lucky. I got in very young and I sort of stayed in. The beauty of this generation is that you don't actually need to rely on the broadcasters. So the only way our content could be seen was to be on a national broadcaster. There was no other platform that existed. Nothing. So now there are digital platforms. There's the internet, online, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever. Insta-flipping-gram. You know, you can broadcast content, get people to see it, get people to like it, build a following, grow your profile without having any support of any major broadcasters, you know? So I think that's a really big advantage. So I would say, like, don't focus too much on getting onto the big platforms. What I learned from being inside the big platforms for many years in later life is that the big platforms, as much as they position themselves as leaders, they're actually followers. So they're just looking to see what are people doing, and then they pick up on it. So if there's someone who's blazing some hot content and people are picking up on it and, you know, they're pushing, and the broadcaster will come to you to bring you in because they want to represent, they just want to bring people on who've got followings and who can help them get ratings. Because at the end of the day, once you're inside a broadcaster, you learn that creativity isn't everything. To us, it was everything. It meant everything. Nothing else mattered. If the piece was just incredibly cool, that's all that mattered. Whether people were watching it or not, it's cool, it's secondary, as long as that stuff is dope. But once I got older and got into the sort of channel management side and all those corporate responsible roles that I've since played, you realize that it's really, at the end of the day, about ratings, you know, for these broadcasters, because that's what they're judged on. That's how they earn their money. That's how they get the advertisers. That's how the multi-choices of this world judge them. If you're not getting the ratings, you are nothing. So the mass reaction determines the creativity, which I think is a conundrum and a quandary for any creative person in any discipline, whether it's fine art or broadcast or music. Your creativity is guided by how people react to it. So these are things I'm saying because it's like that needs to be kept in mind when you're out there trying to get noticed or whatever. It's not only making good content, it's how do you get numbers behind you? And if that means compromising your creativity, you as a creative have to make a decision. I'm either gonna stick to my guns and do what my heart tells me entirely, or I'm gonna like find a way to fuse the two. And that's a creative decision that every creative has to make. Look, I've been lucky in that, again, guidance has put me in these places. So in those early years, it was being part of that revolution of South African media and music and youth culture. And then at Viacom, I was lucky enough to be part of this movement of the growth of African culture, African music, Afro beats to the world. You know, we were part of that. So when we launched MTV in 2005, Nigerian music was bubbling, but there was no decent music videos. And we were like, hold on, if we're trying to show this to the world, we've got to get these videos to be at least sort of be able to stand next to an international video. Because the international market will laugh at our music videos and they won't hear the quality of that music until the visuals, which, I mean, a music video is a marketing tool for music, right? Until that marketing tool matches the language and visual aesthetics that an international audience is used to. And there was a lot of debates that came out about it. I remember getting into like a heated argument with Mambusi Mhlongo. And Mambusi was like, we have an African aesthetic. Why do you want to bring a European and American aesthetic and push that onto our African music and music videos? And it was a very good point. And I think as in life, two complete opposites can both be true at the same time, because that is true, and we should have our own aesthetic, and we shouldn't emulate an international aesthetic. But if you want the international, again, it's like, think of your audience. The same way I was saying, if you want to play in the corporate space, think of how that corporate guy thinks. So if you're thinking, how does an international audience think? You've got to give them something that's comfortable and familiar that they're going to like, right? So we did we brought directors from all over the world to come and workshop with African directors. And you know, we made this project called Making the Video. And it was like we brought international directors to work with African directors and kind of like learn from each other. And we were very cautious to position it like that, learn from each other. Because it wasn't like the international guy coming and teaching. Because let me tell you, when you put that African guy in an environment that we work in, with one DSLR camera, a few lights, whatever, the kind of quality that's coming out in the African space, they could never do. Like these international guys were just like, what? How do you even make a video without like 25 assistants and, you know, like a DOP who's got this? Meanwhile, you've got dudes shooting their own shit, editing their own shit, conceptualizing their own shit. So they were able to, it was a nice exchange on like how to work. But what we were able to do was be part of this like rise in sort of African culture. And what you see happening now globally with Black Panther, with Beyonce featuring all these cats on the album, with what Wizkid is doing, what Davido is doing. These are all artists that there were nobodies when we launched, and we helped give them a platform that the world could see. So in terms of leaving a legacy, I've been very blessed to be part of movements that kind of happened. I don't think it was my vision, and I'm a visionary who saw this. It was like, I was just there at the time when these things were happening. And you know what I mean? It was like I was blessed to be involved in these things, you know? So in terms of where to from here and what kind of legacy do I want to leave, I feel lucky that I've left a legacy, you know? I've been lucky enough to be involved in spaces where I've left a legacy. I then worked with Coca-Cola for a number of years, and we did these music collaborations with Coke Studio, where we started now getting a lot of African artists who've never worked together. And this is almost now a trend now. Everyone's working with someone from another country. But when we started that project, it was hardly happening. So again, we've been able to get the African music scene to talk to each other, become almost like one industry with something that unites it all. Because when we launched MTV, it was very separate. South Africa had Kwaito and House. Nigeria had their sound, and East Africa had their sound. And what you're seeing now is more kind of like an African sound. Okay, it's led by Nigeria, and it's very Nigeria-driven, but they've taken a lot of influence from South African House, from Kwaito. Like all those things helped form what Nigerian music is today. So we have something that, as a continent, we appreciate and can stand behind. So I guess now that the continent is supporting each other, it's ripe to now take it globally. And what's happening globally with African culture is ridiculous. It's like surreal, bruh. To be watching this thing, I mean, these guys are mainstream international artists now. They're saying that Afrobeats is bigger than hip hop. I don't think that's fair to say. But these are the kind of statement that's being made by the Sunday Times in the UK this weekend, published an article about Davido, Afrobeats, bigger than hip hop. It's the new hip hop of the world. So to see this sudden shift, Black Panther, you know, like to see the shift of moving from Eddie Murphy's Coming to America stereotype view of Africa to Black Panther's respectful, quite authentic representation of African culture and people, it's just an amazing shift. To have been part of that is my legacy. I've left a legacy. I've been involved in a legacy. What happens next? I have no fucking idea. I've never had an idea. My whole career, I've never had an idea what happens next. You might find me in 5 years, I'll be that dude, oh, remember that cat, he was a legend. And I'll just leave everything and go live on a farm somewhere and grow some baby marrows. You know what I mean? Like, I'm open to that. So I don't know what's gonna happen next. I don't know where my legacy is gonna be. I'm not saying this is how people should approach life. It's just the way I approach life. And it's kind of worked for me thus far. That I will see where guidance takes me next. And that will be where my legacy is.